Quran, Nabi Sulaiman alayhi salam, Allah Ta'ala then inspired him. Sulaiman alayhi salam was that individual. If you open Tafsir Qurtubi, there were four the ownership of the entire world. Allah accepted that dua of Nabi Sulaiman alayhi salam. After making this dua, Allah blessed him. He was in control of the humankind, the jinn kind, the animals, the winds, the birds, the fish in the ocean. Everything was subjugated to Nabi Sulaiman alayhi salam. Blessed him with the ownership of everything. So Sulaiman alayhi salam dua was that, oh may Allah, when I am asked for my opinion, let my opinion be in accordance to what you are happy with. Number two, oh may Allah bless Salah in Baytul Muqaddas. Oh may Allah let him return from the journey like the day his mother had given birth to him. Let him return from this journey totally sinless. He was a Nabi of Allah. So I think this one hadith should be a sufficient inspiration for each and every one of us. It is mentioned about Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, the son of Umar bin Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu arda. It is said that he used to travel from Medina Munawwara all the way to Baytul Muqaddas, to Masjid Aksar, read 2 rakats of salah, and he would not even drink a sip of water, and he would go back to Medina. So somebody asked him, why do you do this? He said, just to get that reward. Nabi alayhi salam, when we study his life, towards the latter part of his life, Nabi Karim sallallahu alayhi wasallam used to encourage his companions to go to Baytul Muqaddas, to go to Masjid Aksar. It is for that reason you would find that 90% of the companions of the Nabi of Allah sallallahu Sorry about that. fine. I think my voice is loud enough. Yeah. Inshallah, I think there's a bit of issue with the mic system, but I'm sure you can. I think my voice is loud enough. I don't think we need any further amplification, inshallah. So, like I was saying, is that there were many companions of the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Nabi alayhi salam, towards the latter part of his life, he used to encourage the Sahaba to go and visit Baytul Muqaddas. It is for that reason, after Nabi alayhi salam passed away, you know when you go to Jannatul Baqi, Medina, approximately 10,000 Sahaba buried there. Where are the rest of the Sahaba buried? They buried in the land of Sham. Nabi alayhi salam made a special dua for the land of Sham. Barakallahu fi Shamina. Barakallahu fi Yamanina. Oh Allah, bless our Sham. Now when we use the word Sham, you know, in today's context, normally when somebody uses the word Sham, people think that this refers to the modern day Syria. So Sham is not only confined to the modern day Syria, but it refers to Palestine, Lebanon, parts of Egypt, and the land of Syria. So this is what we refer to as the land of Sham, which is commonly referred to as the Levant. So when Nabi alayhi salam, he exhorted the Sahaba, to go to the land of Sham. After the demise of the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 90% of the companions of the Nabi of Allah had migrated from Madinatul Munawwara, and they went to the land of Sham. According to Maqdisi, he says in the precincts of Masjid Aksar, there are 1,000 Anbiya that are buried. 1,000 Nabis of Allah that are buried. And there are hundreds of Sahaba. In fact, when you go to, the Jordan Valley, there are hundreds of, I will tell you about this just now, inshallah, when we speak about the Jordan Valley. So these were the three du'as that Nabi Sulaiman alayhi salam, made. So, so the history of Baytul Muqaddas, if we start from time immemorial, the Byzantines and then the Romans, and, it's a very lengthy history. I just thought the starting point will be from the Battle of Yarmouk. After the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, just prior to him leaving this world, Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Nabi alayhi salam, prior to him leaving this world, so he called Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and Nabi alayhi salam encouraged Umar. According to one narration, Nabi alayhi salam had already prophesied that Umar will be that individual who will conquer Masjid Aksar. So after the demise of the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he had passed on, and Sayyidina Umar had taken the reins of the Islamic Empire. He had become the Khalif, the great giant Umar. In fact, I've been to some libraries across the globe, and the works of Umar who had ruled the world for 10 years and 6 months, is considered to be the golden age of Islam. Is considered to be the golden age of Islam. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu was a visionary. So nonetheless, this happened approximately, after the Nabi of Allah passed away, 15 years after the migration of Nabi alayhi salam to Madinatul Munawwara. So in the 15th year after the Hijri, Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he dispatches the army to Yarmouk, and he appoints Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu as the Amir of this delegation. Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah was a very close companion of the Nabi of Allah, a high-ranking Sahabi of Nabi Karim sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So they went into and they fought the Battle of Yarmouk. Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, they conquered many countries, and he was a visionary. They conquered many countries. So all the countries around Palestine were conquered by the Muslims, by Ubaidah ibn Jarrah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu and the army of the Muslims. The only place that was left was Jerusalem. So the books of history have recorded that Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, with these companions, with the army, they march towards Jerusalem. And they come to the outskirts of Jerusalem. Where do they come to? They come to a place called Ariha. Ariha, which is the common day Jericho, which is considered to be the oldest city in the world. It is said it was the first city that was inhabited in the world, and there were approximately 10,000 people that lived in the city of Jericho. It's the oldest city in the world. According to some scholars, they give different opinions, but the more preferred opinion is that Jericho is the first inhabited city in the world. So this is where they come. So Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, they camped at Jericho for a few weeks, and then they started advancing towards Jerusalem. When they advanced towards Jerusalem, at that time, the Patriarch of Jerusalem, his name was Sophronus. When he heard that the army of the Muslims are approaching Jerusalem, so what he does, Sophronus was the doorkeeper. He had the keys to Palestine. He was the Patriarch of Jerusalem. He steps out of Jerusalem to meet Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he meets this Patriarch of Jerusalem, his name was Sophronus. So he says that, I'm prepared to hand over Jerusalem to you, to the Muslims, but on one condition. Your Khalif who's in Medina, I want him to come and I will hand the keys over to him. So Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu was amongst those that were part of the army of Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah radiallahu ta'ala anhu. The other companions, Sharahbil bin Hassana, Mu'adh ibn Jabal, Bilal ibn Rabah, this was the galaxy of Sahaba. Like I said, all these Sahaba, the cream, the best of the best, they all left Medina Munawwara after the Nabi of Allah, had passed away. So they tell Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah, why should we send for Umar bin Khattab to come all the way from the capital Medina to come to Jerusalem? Let us send Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah says that, perhaps this is an opportune moment for Umar bin Khattab, the Khalifa, to come to Medina Munawwara. Just to make mention, Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when we study his life, Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu never ever left Madinatul Munawwara, with the exception of one occasion when he left Medina to collect the keys of Jerusalem. He made this dua. He used to make this dua repeatedly, which is recorded in many books of ahadith. Allahumma rzuqni shahadatan fi sabilik waj'al mawti bi baladi rasulik. That, oh may Allah grant me martyrdom whilst I'm striving in your path. And oh may Allah, let me be buried in the city of Medina Munawwara, in the city of your Habib sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah accepted both the du'as of Sayyidina Umar. Nonetheless, Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he then sends a letter to Medina Munawwara. He sends a letter. This was in the 15th year after the migration, 15th year after the Hijri. He sends a message to Medina Munawwara, to Umar bin Khattab, a lengthy letter which has been recorded in the books of history. And he writes in this letter that I write this letter to you that the Patriarch of Jerusalem is prepared to hand over the keys of Jerusalem, not to anybody else but to you. And we request you to come to Jerusalem to collect, to get the keys of Jerusalem. So Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, what does he do? He invited two of his companions, Usman bin Affan radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and who was the other companion that he had invited to this meeting was Ali bin Abi Talib. Contrary to the belief of many people that the personal advisor to Umar bin Khattab was Ali bin Abi Talib radiallahu ta'ala anhu. This perception that is created by certain individuals that it was a very hostile relationship between Umar bin Khattab and Ali bin Abi Talib. This is totally incorrect. They enjoyed a very cordial relationship, and like I mentioned, that Ali bin Abi Talib, was the personal advisor to Umar bin Khattab. So Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he called Usman bin Affan. He said, what is your opinion? Should I go to Jerusalem? So Usman radiallahu ta'ala anhu tells Umar bin Khattab that perhaps if you go, they might have a sinister motive and they might kill you. You rather remain in Medina and send someone else on your behalf. Ali bin Abi Talib radiallahu on the opposite end, He said that, O Omar, Amirul Mu'mineen, the Nabi of Allah had prophesied, in a very subtle way, that you will conquer Baytul Muqaddas. So why don't you go? So Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu says, let me think about it. The next morning, he calls Ali bin Abi Talib, and he said that I will accede to your request, and I will journey onwards towards Jerusalem. So Ali radiallahu ta'ala then tells him that why don't you take an army with you? Don't go alone. One day say, Umar was a visionary. So one day he's sitting, during the Battle of Egypt, and he receives a letter that the Muslims are asking for reinforcement in the battle in Egypt. So he's sitting on the pulpit, and Umar bin Khattab, he looks at the congregation, and he pointed towards 4 men. And he said, these 4 will be the reinforcement. So people tell him, Umar, Amirul Mu'mineen, they are asking for reinforcement, and you're selecting only 4 men. He said, these 4 individuals resemble the life of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even if I have to replace them with 40,000, it would be of no avail. Umar was a giant. So he tells Ali bin Abi Talib, I will travel alone to Jerusalem. So Ali bin Abi Talib says that take someone with you. He said, okay, I'll take my servant with. So it's Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, 1 conveyance, 1 camel, and his servant. It is said that the clothing that he was wearing, Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, had 17 patches on it. And he's going to conquer Jerusalem. Amirul Mu'mineen, Umar bin Khattab, radiallahu ta'ala anhu arda. They say, Umar, take somebody is going far away. You said, take a new vehicle and go. He said, give me my old camel. I will mount on that and I will go. Look at the justice and the fairness of Umar. He leaves from Medina Munawwara. It was the only time that he left from Medina Munawwara, and he never left Medina again after returning, after conquering Jerusalem. So he tells his servant that, you know what, I will ride, and thereafter you will ride. We will have turns to ride. So the servant tells Umar, you are Amirul Mu'mineen. How could I be sitting on the conveyance and you walking? He says, no, I need to be fair to you. I will ride half the distance and you will ride half the distance. And they continue like this. Umar rode for a while, and then he told his servant, you mount onto the conveyance. And when they entered, so it's a long story, they continued traveling for days on end. According to scholars and ulama, they traveled for approximately 40 days. And when they arrived in the outskirts of Jerusalem, where did they come to? They came to one place. And Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he heard that Umar is approaching Baytul Muqaddas, Jerusalem. So he goes to the outskirts to welcome Umar bin Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu. It is mentioned that when Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah looked at Umar riding an old conveyance of his, and wearing a garment that is torn and tattered with 17 patches on it, he tells Umar bin Khattab that why don't you, let me give you a new conveyance, let me give you a new garment. You can't meet the Patriarch of Jerusalem in this condition. So one narration says, Umar acceded to this request. He said, okay, give it to me. And as he puts on this new garment, Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu mentioned those legendary words. What did he say? نَحْنُ قَوْمٌ أَعَزَّنَا اللَّهُ بِالْإِسْلَامِ. We are such a nation, Allah has given us honor and dignity through Islam. If you are going to search for honor and dignity anywhere else, Allah will disgrace you. So he says, in simplicity, in this Allah has kept victory. He takes out that garment, and he says that give me my old garment, give me my old kurta that is torn and tattered. Then he tells Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah that could I visit you at home? Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, it is mentioned that when Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu entered his home, what was his home? It was a tent. And he entered the tent, and there was absolutely nothing inside. So Umar asked him, then where do you live? He said, this is where I stay. He said, how do you manage? He said, my Nabi has taught us to be simple in life, and this is how I've continued my life. It comes in the narrations that Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he looked at the tent of Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah, his eyes welled up with tears and he started sobbing and crying like a little baby. It is said Omar, as he leaves the outskirts of Jerusalem, now he's about to enter Jerusalem to meet the Patriarch of Jerusalem, Sophronus. He falls into a ditch, and he falls into his clothes is soiled with mud and dirt. And Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu enters Jerusalem. The Patriarch of Jerusalem, Sophronus, he comes to a mountain outside Baytul Muqaddas to welcome Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu then greets him. And the incident is so interesting. It is said that Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu then spoke to him. There was an interaction, there was there's some words that they shared a close bond, because Sophronus told Umar bin Khattab that I have read in my divine scriptures that a man who resembles you will collect the keys of Jerusalem. And you fit the description that is found in the divine scriptures. So Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu says, let's go. As they go, but he said, before we enter Jerusalem, let us enter into a pact. This is known as, the pact of Umar radiallahu. In fact, up to this day, I will tell you just now, there is a masjid which is called Masjid of Umar. The pact that was drawn up between Umar bin Khattab and Sophronus, the Patriarch of Jerusalem, that we will not destroy your churches, we will not destroy your crosses, Muslims and Christians will live in harmony. As they entered Jerusalem, according to certain scholars and ulama, there were 70 Jewish families that were living in Jerusalem at that time. 70 Jewish families. So Umar radiallahu ta'ala tells Sophronus that take me on a guided tour of Jerusalem. Where does he take him to? The first place that he takes him to the church, which is commonly referred to as Kanisatul Qiyamah. In English they call it the Holy Sepulchre. This is the most historical site. Like for us, the most historical site as Muslims is the Kaaba in Mecca. For Christians, the most virtuous place on Mother Earth is the Holy Sepulchre. They believe that is where, this is the Christian belief, that Isa Salaam, Jesus was crucified. And of course, that's not our belief. Nonetheless, Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, with the Sophronus, they enter into this church. And it was the time for Salatul Dhuhr. So Sophronus tells Umar bin Khattab that why don't you pray in the church? What did Umar tell him? Last night I spoke about peaceful coexistence. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he tells Sophronus, the Patriarch of Jerusalem, if I pray in the church today, tomorrow down the line, my people, the Muslims, will take ownership of the church. And they will say, because Umar prayed in the church, this church belongs to the Muslims. Hence, I will not pray in the church. So Umar radiallahu, what he did, he stepped out of the church, and then he picked up a stone. And as he threw the stone, where the stone landed, Umar went, and that is where he performed the Salatul Dhuhr. Now let me tell you something. You see, when Umar radiallahu ta'ala, when he stepped out of the church, so he spoke to the people of Palestine, Jerusalem, and there was a person by the name of Ka'b al-Ahbar. He was a Jewish rabbi who had embraced Islam. And Umar asked him, who is the most influential family in Jerusalem? So Ka'b al-Ahbar tells Umar bin Khattab, the most influential family is Al-Nusaybah. Al-Nusaybah. So Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he says that who is the eldest in the family? Al-Nusaybah. Like when Nabi alayhi salam, they rebuilt the Kaaba in the time of the Quraysh, and Nabi alayhi salam took the keys of the Kaaba and he handed over to the family, Bani Shaybi. The Bani Shaybi, and he said that the keys of the Kaaba will remain in this family right up to the day of Qiyamah. Up to this day, the keys of the Kaaba remain with that particular family. So Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he asked Ka'b al-Ahbar, who is the most prominent family living in Jerusalem? So he said it's Al-Nusaybah. He said, call the eldest person of this family. A elderly person, a gentleman comes to Umar bin Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu gives him the keys to this church. And he said the keys to this church will remain in your progeny right up to the day of Qiyamah. So when you go to this church, up to this day, the church in the morning is opened by the family of Al-Nusayba, a Muslim family, and in the evening, the church is locked by a Muslim family. The Muslims and the Christians lived in harmony. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, like I mentioned, he steps outside the church and he threw a pebble. And where the pebble landed, 100 feet in front of the church, and he said, this is where I will perform salah. Salahuddin al-Ayyubi radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he conquered Jerusalem, I will tell you about him just now. When he conquered Jerusalem, he built a masjid on that particular spot, and that masjid up to this day is known as Masjid Umar. It was the time for Dhuhr Salah. Something interesting. So remember, it's been many, many years. Umar was in Medina Munawwarah. He never left Medina. After the Nabi of Allah passed away, it was the reign of Abu Bakr, who 2 years approximately. Then it was the reign of Umar, approximately 10 years. So we're looking at about 12, 13 years. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, after 13 years, he meets his companions in Jerusalem. Who was there? Mu'adh ibn Jabal, Shurahbil bin Hasana, Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah, Bilal ibn Rabah. Bilal was the muaddin of Islam. So before the Salatul Dhuhr, Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he tells Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu, why don't you call out the adhan? So Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu tells Umar, it is mentioned about Bilal, when Nabi alayhi salam passed away, it is said he became so emotional that he left Medina Munawwarah. And Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu sent a letter to him. He said, oh Bilal, why don't you come back to Medina? According to one narration, when Bilal came back to Medina and he started calling out the adhan, when he came to the words, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, it is said that he cried so much, the whole of Medina cried. And he couldn't complete the adhan. And he left from Medina, he never returned to Medina again. So Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu says, where is Bilal? This is a meeting after 13, 15 years. So Bilal steps forward. What a moment that must have been. Bilal was that companion of the Nabi of Allah, the only Sahabi. On the occasion of Fatih Makkah, Nabi alayhi salam allowed him to stand on top of the Kaaba and call out the adhan. The first muaddin in Medina was Bilal ibn Rabah. And the first person to call out the adhan in Baytul Muqaddas in Jerusalem was none other than Bilal ibn Rabah. So Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu was the muaddin of Makkatul Mukarramah, Medina Munawwarah and Jerusalem. Subhanallah. So Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he tells him, Bilal, why don't you call out the adhan? So he says, no, I will not call out the adhan. He said, I made a vow with my Allah. After my Nabi passed away, I would never call out the adhan. That separation is just too much. So Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu looks at him and he said, Bilal, if you call out the adhan, the Nabi of Allah would become extremely happy. He would become extremely happy. And he manages to convince Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And Bilal thereafter calls out the adhan. What a moment this must have been. And it is said when he called out the adhan, he started going back in time when he used to call out the adhan in the presence of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. After the Salatul Dhuhr that was performed, it is said that Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu, now this entourage, the galaxy, the best of the best, Umar bin Khattab, Shurahbil bin Hasana, Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah, Mu'adh ibn Jabal, and the galaxy of Sahaba, we're all gathered together. And Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he asked Sopranus that show me the rock where the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ascended to the heavens. So he brings him to a certain place. Masjid Aksar was a rubbish dump. And it was, it was filled with rubbish and dirt. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, with his own hands, he starts cleaning that piece of ground. And then he asked Ka'b al-Ahbar that where is the rock when Nabi alayhi salam ascended on the journey of Mi'raj. So Ka'b al-Ahbar, because he lived in Jerusalem, he had some idea where the rock is. When they came to this rock, it was full of dirt. And Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, according to the narrations, he goes down on his knees and he takes out his kurta and he starts sweeping that particular area. And he comes across this rock where Nabi alayhi salam stood when he ascended on the journey of Mi'raj. And then he asked Ka'b al-Ahbar that where should we build the masjid? Where should we build the masjid? So Ka'b al-Ahbar tells Umar bin Khattab that build the masjid behind the dome of the rock. So Umar tells him, you have been influenced by Judaism. The masjid will not be built behind the dome of the rock, but rather Masjid Aksar will be built in front of the dome of the rock. So Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, there was a wooden structure, that was then erected that could accommodate approximately 3,000 people, built by Umar bin Khattab. And the first salah that was performed by Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu in Masjid Aksar was when he built this masjid. It was, according to one narration, it was the Salatul Maghrib that he made imamat. And in the first rakat, he read Surah Sad, which appears in the 23rd juz of Quran. Why did he read the surah? In Surah Sad, if you study the surah, reference is made to Sulaiman alayhi salam, to Dawood alayhi salam, and various prophets of Allah. In the second rakat, he recited the surah that we heard our Hafiz reciting, Surah Isra, Surah Bani Israel. So Surah Sad was read in the first rakat, and Surah Bani Israel was read in the second rakat. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, then he went on a guided tour and he visited various areas, around, Baytul Muqaddas, around Jerusalem, to Baytul Laham, the birthplace of Nabi Isa Salaam. He went to the gravesite of Nabi Ibrahim Salam, which we will speak about just now. It is said Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu spent a few weeks, in Jerusalem, and thereafter he left from Jerusalem. He appointed Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah as the Amir of Jerusalem, and then he went back to Madinatul Munawwara. And like I mentioned earlier on, Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, that was the only time in his life that he left Medina Munawwara to collect the keys from Sophronius, who was the Patriarch of Jerusalem, and he never left Medina again up to the point when he was performing that Salatul Fajr. And there was one Majusi, a fire worshipper, by the name of Abu Lu'lu al-Majusi. And Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, the day before that, this Abu Lu'lu al-Majusi, he comes to complain to Sayyidina Umar. And Umar found no merit in his complaint. So the next day, Fajr time, this Abu Lu'lu al-Majusi, he hid himself behind one of the pillars in Masjid al-Nabawi. And when Umar was performing the Salatul Fajr, this Abu Lu'lu al-Majusi, he steps forward and he stabs Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu 9 times. According to one narration, 7 times. And Umar falls down unconscious. And when he regains his consciousness, what did he say? Al salla al-Muslimun al-Fajra. Have they completed the Salatul Fajr? That was the greatest concern of Umar. And the wounds that he had sustained as a result of those wounds, Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab then passed away in Madinatul Munawwara. So that was a manifestation of that dua that he made, that, oh may Allah grant me martyrdom whilst I'm striving in your paths, and oh may Allah let me die in the city of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah accepted both the duas of Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala anhu arda. Nonetheless, after Sayyidina Umar had passed away, now when we look at Jerusalem, we can look at it from a political perspective, but that is not our intention. I was mentioning to some of the brothers a little earlier, when I visited Masjid Aksar, I've been there with the grace of the Almighty Allah many a times. Alhamdulillah, with the grace of Allah. And one day it was after Salatul Jumu'ah, as we stepped out of the masjid, in the old city, and I had seen a bookshop. As I walked into the bookshop, there was an elderly gentleman there. So I asked him in the Arabic language that, do you have any book on the virtues of Baytul Muqaddas? So he says, okay, just give me a few moments. And he comes out after a few moments and he gives me this book, Fadail Bayt al-Muqaddas. It's approximately 500 pages, with all authentic narrations, with the chain of narrators going right up to Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when Nabi alayhi salam spoke about the virtues of Bayt al-Muqaddas. So when we open the books of ahadith, the wealth of knowledge that is contained in the books of ahadith. So Maymuna radiallahu ta'ala anha, towards the latter part of Nabi alayhi salam's life, Nabi alayhi salam said, go and perform salah in Bayt al-Muqaddas. She said, O Nabi of Allah, if we cannot travel to Bayt al-Muqaddas, Nabi alayhi salam said, send oil for the people of Jerusalem. Send oil for the people of Jerusalem. And based on that one statement, many Sahaba, visited Jerusalem. So the hadith that I quoted before you in the beginning, Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, Man ahalla bihajjin aw umratin min Masjid Aksar ila al-Masjid al-Haram, wajabat lahu al-Jannah. That person who dons the ihram in Masjid Aksar, and thereafter you perform either Hajj or either you perform Umrah, one narration says, Allah will purify you from your sins like the day your mother had given birth to you. And one narration says that Jannah becomes wajib, for that person who dons the ihram and performs Umrah or Hajj from Bayt al-Muqaddas. Can we well imagine the sanctity of this particular place? According to one narration, Nabi alayhi salam said, you will not find the space of 4 fingers except that one Nabi of Allah stood on that land. Can we well imagine? Makkah has its virtue, Medina Munawwara has its virtue, but Bayt al-Muqaddas, Masjid Aksar, is the only piece of ground on Mother Earth where all the Anbiya at one time had gathered and performed salah behind the Nabi of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So inshallah at this point, I know time is running, and we will just move on to the, the next, okay. So the first slide that we had seen, that is the entire compound of Bayt al-Muqaddas. Now, you see the masjid that you see at the top, the Qibli Masjid, if you can just go back. Okay, you see the masjid, which is known as the Qibli Masjid. Why it's known as the Qibli Masjid? This was the first Qibla of Islam, the first Qibla of the Muslims. When Nabi alayhi salam was in Makkah Mukarramah, they faced in the direction of Masjid Aksar. And when he was in Madinatul Munawwara, for the first 16, 17 months, Nabi alayhi salam and his companion faced in the direction of Masjid Aksar. It was the first Qibla. And when Nabi alayhi salam was there in Masjid al-Qiblatayn, that ayat was revealed, the verse was revealed to the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, where the Qibla now changed from Bayt al-Muqaddas to Masjid al-Haram in Makkah. We all know this. So why it's called the Qibli Masjid? It was the first Qibla of the Muslims. So that is why it's called the Qibli Masjid. So Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, where this masjid is built, that is the place where Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, constructed the masjid that could accommodate approximately 3,000 people. Now, the original masjid, we need to understand, it's right at the bottom, right? So when you go to the next slide, now this is the original Masjid Aksar. The original Masjid Aksar. So this mihrab that you see here, this is known as the mihrab of Zakaria. كلما دخل عليها زكريا المحراب وجد عندها رزقا. An incident that is recorded in Quran, that Maryam alayha salam, Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala used to send, Allah used to send dates. Even in the winter months, she used to receive dates and a sustenance. So Zakaria asked her, where is this from? So she says that this is from the side of Allah. Inna Allah yarzuqu man yasha bighayri hisab. So this particular area that you see here, this is where the original Masjid Aksar is. The top masjid that you see today, that is not the original masjid, but when you go at the bottom, you will find the original Bayt al-Muqaddas, the original Masjid Aksar, and there is an area just to the left of this. I'm sure we've got it in one of the slides. If it is there, we will show it to you. that is where the chamber of Maryam alayhi salam, used to be. In fact, when I was there a few weeks ago, this area is now closed. You can see it from outside. This is where she used to sit, Maryam alayhi salam. So this is a very historical place. It is said that the masjid that was built in the time of Nabi Sulaiman alayhi salam, Sulaiman alayhi salam, I mentioned in the beginning, if you recall, that with the assistance of the jinnat. In fact, up to this day when you go, you see these huge boulders. It is impossible that this was built by the humankind. This was the intervention of jinnat, that assisted Nabi Sulaiman alayhi salam, in building, Baytul Muqaddas. So these were huge boulders that perhaps, when you stand, it's about 5 meters. One boulder is about 2 meters wide and 5 meters high. And these boulders were placed one upon the other, and Masjid Aksar was built. So this is where the original, let's go to the next slide. This is where the original, so what you see here, this is the area that is leading to the original Masjid Aksar. And this is known as the place where Salahuddin al-Ayyubi radiallahu, this great Salahuddin, one day somebody asked him, Salahuddin, why we don't ever see you smiling? He said, how can I smile when Masjid Aksar has not been liberated? He said, the day Masjid Aksar is liberated, that's the day I would smile. So this is an area, in fact, where you see in front of this, where this Musalla area is, right at the front, I'm sure if you could, yes, that area there. There is a room there. That is where Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, that is where he sat in i'tikaf. It's a very historical place. This is a place which is, normally when you go to Makkah or Medina, there are thousands of people, and it's an amazing feeling. But I swear by Allah, when you come to Baytul Muqaddas, normally in Ramadan it gets quite busy, but outside Ramadan it's extremely quiet. When you sit there, you can feel, the presence of these angels that are thronging around this place. Because Allah Himself makes mention in Quran, الَّذِي بَارَكْنَا حَوْلَهُ. Not only this masjid, but the precincts, the entire area around the masjid, is sacred and blessed. Okay, so the next place that we come to, this is another very historical place. This is the rock upon which Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam stood when he ascended on the journey of Mi'raj. So we use 2 words. One is Isra and Mi'raj. Isra is the journey between Mecca and Baytul Muqaddas, and Mi'raj, Araja in Arabic, means to ascend. So the journey between Masjid Aksar and the 7 heavens and beyond, this part of the journey is known as Al-Mi'raj. This is where Nabi alayhi salam stood, and he ascended, he stood on this rock, and he went to the 7 heavens and beyond. It's a lengthy narration that's recorded in the books of Ahadith. One day the Sahaba asked the Nabi of Allah, or rather Nabi alayhi salam asked his companions, do you know what is the distance between the earth and the first heaven? Sahaba ikram say, Allah wa Rasuluhu a'lam. Allah and His Nabi know best. Nabi alayhi salam said, between the earth and the first heaven is a distance of 500 years, and not our years. وَإِنَّ يَوْمًا عِنْدَ رَبِّكَ كَأَلْفِ سَنَةٍ مِمَّا تَعُدُّونَ. One day by your Lord is 1,000 years of this life. وَمِنْ كُلِّ سَمَاءٍ إِلَى السَّمَاءِ مَسِيرَةُ 500 سَنَةٍ. From the first heaven to the second, second to the third to the fourth. The distance between each heaven is a distance of 500 years. Above the 7th heaven is a sea. From the top to the bottom is a distance of 500 years. And above that is the arsh of Allah, is the throne of Allah. And then Sahaba asked the Nabi of Allah, when you went on this journey of Mi'raj, did you see anything else between you and Allah? It's a lengthy narration of Majma'ul Zawaid. Nabi alayhi salam said, between Allah and the angels that are holding aloft the arsh of Allah are 70 veils of darkness, 70 veils of light, 70 veils of red pearl, 70 veils of yellow pearl, 70 veils of green pearl, 70 veils of a mixture between light and fire, 70 veils of water, 70 veils of ice, 70 veils of clouds, and 70 veils of Allah's greatness which cannot be described. Nabi alayhi salam transcends, understand other commands of Allah were sent down to Nabi alayhi salam whilst he was in this dunya. for this command of Allah for salah, Allah had taken his Nabi and transported his Nabi to the 7 heavens and beyond and presented him with this gift of Mi'raj. Just one point I would like to make mention of, and perhaps many of us don't know this. You know, in our salah, when we sit in tashahhud, what do we read? At-tahiyyatu lillahi was-salawat wat-tayyibat. Where did this originate from? Where did this originate from? So when Nabi alayhi salam, when he ascended on the journey of Mi'raj, he comes in front of Allah Rabbul Izzah. Allah Ta'ala tells him, Udnu minni, come closer to me, come closer to me. ثُمَّ دَنَا فَتَدَلَّى فَكَانَ قَابَ قَوْسَيْنِ أَوْ أَدْنَى. And then Nabi alayhi salam praises the Almighty Allah. At-tahiyyat lillahi was-salawat wat-tayyibat. Nabi alayhi salam praised Allah in these words. Allah responded by saying, As-salamu alayka ayyuhan nabi wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. These were the words of Allah. And then Nabi alayhi salam told Allah, As-salamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi salihin. Allah said, may my choicest blessings be upon you, O Muhammad. Nabi alayhi salam said, O may Allah, if you're showering your blessings upon me, don't confine it to me, but let all my ummah enjoy that mercy. You know, one day there was one companion of Nabi alayhi salam was sitting and he made this dua, Allahumma arhamni warham Muhammad wa la tarham ma'ana ahada. Oh Allah, show a mercy on me and on Muhammad, and besides both of us, show a mercy on no one else. Nabi alayhi salam looked at him and he said, why are you restricting the mercy of Allah? Allah's mercy is infinite. Allah's mercy is unlimited. So Nabi alayhi salam said, rather make this dua, oh Allah, show a mercy on me and on Muhammad and every other person that is living on Mother Earth. So Nabi alayhi salam praised Allah. At-tahiyyatu lillah was-salawatu wat-tayyibat. Allah responded by saying, As-salamu alayka ayyuhan nabi wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. When Allah said this, my Nabi said, As-salamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi salihin. And Jibreel was listening to this heavenly discussion between Allah and his Nabi. What did he say? Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. So that at-tahiyyat that we read in Salah, this was the conversation that had taken place between Allah and his Nabi on the journey of Mi'raj. So what is Salah? Mi'rajul mu'min. You know, although we are standing on this, a person has been transported into the court of Allah. Like the scholars and the ulama have explained, that when Nabi alayhi salam went on this journey of Mi'raj, 70,000 veils between Nabi alayhi salam transcended and he went right in front of the Almighty Allah. Now this is the rock. According to what, there is one narration, Nabi alayhi salam said, As-sakhra wal-ajwa min al-jannah. The ajwa date, you know, that we normally eat, and the rock upon which Nabi alayhi salam stood, both of these are from Jannah. Up to this day when you go, in fact we can move on to the next slide. Okay, I'll show it to you just now, inshallah. So this is the Qibli Masjid that we looked at. Right, I'll just tell you about this. Okay, so when Nabi alayhi salam, where did he perform the salah? Where did he lead the Anbiya in salah? So next to the dome of the rock, next to the rock, there is a mihrab, you know, that is built on the an area next to the rock, and that is where Nabi alayhi salam, it is believed. We cannot say with absolute certainty. So the scholars and the ulama have written, it was in that particular area where the Nabi of Allah led the Anbiya in salah before he ascended, you know, on the journey of Mi'raj. Okay, we will just go through these because we have quite a few of these pics that we will go through. What you see here, so you will find Masjid Aksar at the front. Behind that is the dome of the rock. That entire area is known as Masjid Aksar. Now, if you're facing in the direction of the Qibla, if you could just go to the original slide, the first one. Okay, so is the thing okay? So this is Masjid Aksar. This is the dome of the rock. Okay, this is where this is the old city. This entire area is Masjid Aksar. Here This is, we will show you the pics just now. This is where the Muslim Qabristan is. Maqbaratul Rahmah. And in this graveyard, there are few companions of Nabi alayhi salam that are buried. Shaddad bin Aus and Ubadah bin Samit radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And according to certain companions, Feroz Daylami. Feroz Daylami, who was the companion of Nabi alayhi salam, one day before Nabi alayhi salam passed away, there was a person by the name of Aswad al-Anasi who laid claim to prophethood. He said, when Muhammad dies, you know, people must follow me. I will take up the position of leadership. And Nabi alayhi salam said Feroz Daylami to go and kill this man. So one day before Nabi alayhi salam passed away, Feroz Daylami, he comes back to the Nabi of Allah and he said, I've killed the man who laid claim to prophethood. After Nabi alayhi salam passed away, he also migrated to Jerusalem and he passed away and he's buried. According to one narration, his grave is also in this particular Qabristan. So when you go to this particular Qabristan, we will show you the pics just now. There are two graves, we know the precise location. Ubadah bin Samit and Shaddad bin Aus radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Shaddad bin Aus radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, it is mentioned about him that before Nabi alayhi salam passed away, Nabi alayhi salam told him that your children will be the Imams of Masjid Aksar. Up to this day, some of the Imams of Masjid Aksar, when you trace their lineage goes up to Shaddad bin Aus radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. So this is where the Muslim graveyard is. Okay, and here at the bottom, this is known as Wadi Jahannam. There are some scholars and ulama that are sitting here. If you study the ayats of Quran, in fact there are 3 verses. وَإِن مِّنكُمْ إِلَّا وَارِدُهَا كَانَ عَلَى رَبِّكَ حَتْمًا مَقْضِيًّا. Every person will have to cross the bridge of Sirat. Every person will have to, when we speak about the Pul Sirat, every person will have to cross the bridge of Sirat. Now when we look at the advent of Qiyamah, why is this place historical? Understand where what we are talking about. So this is where the Dome of the Rock is, right? This is Masjid Aksar, this entire area, the Qibli Masjid, the Dome of the Rock. There is, we cannot see it here, there is a dome that is here. It's called the Dome of the Chains. It's a huge dome that is here. It is believed that it is at this point where Israfil alayhi salam وَنُفِخَ فِي السُّورِ فَسَعِقَ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ. The trumpet will be blown. The entire universe will be destroyed. The entire universe will be obliterated. This is where Israfil alayhi salam will station himself. According to some scholars, this is where he is. You cannot see him with the physical eye, but you can see him with the spiritual eye. This is where he is stationed with a bugle in his mouth, with his gaze focused towards the heavens, waiting for the command of Allah to be given, and then the trumpet will be blown, the entire universe will be destroyed, the entire universe will be obliterated. And it is mentioned, it's a lengthy narration. Let me tell you this very quickly, that when this happens, Allah will then summon the angel of death. And Allah will ask the angel of death, who is left now? The angel of death will reply, Baqiya Jibreel, Mikael, Israfil, Abduka Da'if. Ya Allah, it is 4 chief angels. Allah will tell the angel of death, go to Jibreel. The angel of death will come to this particular place. And Jibreel will be prostrating before the Almighty Allah. The angel of death will tell him, we are 4 chief angels, your time has come to go. Jibreel will cry to Allah. The soul of Jibreel will be removed here. Then the soul of Mikael, the soul of Israfil, and then the angel of death. Allah will ask the angel of death, Man baqiya min khalqi. Tell me who is left now. The angel of death will reply, Baqiya abduka da'if. Ya Allah, it is me and me alone. Me and me alone. Allah's Nabi is making reference to this particular place where the trumpet will be blown from this particular place. Now the rock, beneath the rock, you'll find that there is a cave. There is one narration, but this is a weak narration, where they say that those children who passed away before attaining the age of puberty, the souls of these children are buried, beneath, this is where they will gather from on the day of Qiyamah. But according to, I have not come across this in any authentic narration. There are some scholars and ulama who normally make reference to it. So Allah alone knows how authentic the narration is. My honest opinion, it's a very weak narration with regards to beneath the dome. So you'll find there are many, like you get Bukhari, Muslim, Tirmidhi, Abu Dawood, Nasa'i, the famous kitabs of hadith. I always say you get one kitab, it's called the Lal Kitab. Lal Kitab, you get all these stories that people normally tell you. So when people go to Jerusalem and these guides, they take them on this guided tour, they give them all the narrations from the Lal Kitab. This is the beauty of the deen of Allah. There's a chain of narrators. So, like I mentioned, so this is where the trumpet will be blown on the day of Qiyamah. Very historical place. This is the Qabristan of the Muslims. Maqbaratul Rahmah. And here at the bottom is what we refer to here at the bottom. This is Wadi Jahannam. Wadi Jahannam. The bridge of Sirat. This is where it would be placed on the day of Qiyamah. وَإِن مِّنكُمْ إِلَّا وَارِدُهَا كَانَ عَلَى رَبِّكَ حَتْمًا مَقْضِيًّا. Every person will have to cross the bridge of Sirat. In the 16th juz, this ayah can be found in the concluding verses of Surah Maryam. Every person will have to cross over this bridge. And my Nabi said that some will fly over this bridge like the speed of lightning. Some will crawl over this bridge. And those who will fall off this bridge will fall into the fire of Jahannam. So this land at the bottom here, when you go there today, this is the Jewish cemetery. This is the Jewish graveyard. This is known as Wadi Jahannam. This is known as Wadi Jahannam. And then on the other end, we will show you just now, there is a mountain which is called Jabal Zaytun, the Mount of Olives. The Mount of Olives. It's a very historical, mountain in the annals of Islamic history, and I will tell you why. So here again, this is the Qibla Masjid. That's the Dome of the Rock. Okay, before we move on, this is Masjid of Barak. Why it's called Masjid of Barak? When Nabi Salaam, when he mounted the Barak in Mecca, and he was shown various things, and he was brought to Baytul Muqaddas. And Nabi Salaam, he comes to this point, and this is where he dismounts from the Barak. And the Barak was tied where the other Anbiya used to tie their animals. And from there, Nabi Salaam, he walks. This is what is known as Mashyatul Nabi, what the scholars and the ulama have written. Nabi Salaam walked in this direction, and he walks here. And as he walks, he was introduced to the Anbiya. Ibrahim Salam, Adam Salam, the galaxy of Anbiya. And there is a dome that you see here. This is the place where it is alleged that Nabi alayhi salam, not the gold dome, but next to that there is a small dome that is there. That is the place where the scholars and the ulama have identified as the place where Nabi alayhi salam led the Anbiya, in Salah. So this is a very sacred piece of ground. So we will show you just now the interior of this masjid, a masjid that was built by Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, called Masjid of Barak. Where the Barak was tied, very historical place. So like I mentioned, this is what we refer to as the old city. We spoke about the church earlier on. When Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab, he was taken on a guided tour by the Patriarch of Jerusalem, Sophronus. That church, you will find that it is here. It is here. We can't see it it's within the old city, within the boundary of the old city. And Masjid Umar is also here. So it's within the boundary of the old city. That's the rock, that's Masjid Aksar. Okay, now like I mentioned, is that you got Masjid Aksar on the eastern side is what we refer to as Jabal Zaytun, the Mount of Olives. This particular structure that you see here, this is the place where Nabi Isa Salaam ascended to the heavens. This is the place. Inside here when you go, you'll see the footprint. According to, it is alleged that is the footprint of Nabi Isa Salaam. Allah Ta'ala makes mention in Quran that when they wanted to, kill Isa Salaam, there was another person that had taken up the shape or the form who resembled Nabi Isa Salaam. But rafa'ahu Allahu ilayh. Allah Ta'ala says that he was raised to the heavens. This is the place where it happened from. The ascension of Nabi Isa Salaam happened from Jabal Zaytun. And it is our belief that close to the end of time, Nabi Isa Salaam, Nusul Isa, will come down and in the Minarat al-Bayda, by the masjid in Damascus, the Umayyad Masjid, and thereafter he will kill the Dajjal, etc. One point I'd forgotten to mention, when we speak about the Dajjal, we normally speak about Makkah and Medina, but the Dajjal will come to the walls of Jerusalem and the angels will chase him away. So the Dajjal will not be able to enter Jerusalem. He will not be able to enter Jerusalem. Okay, so this is in the precincts. You'll find around Masjid Aksar, there are many of these domes that are built. Why do you find these domes? Many of these domes have been built in the honor of many great, many great scholars and ulama, that lived in Bayt al-Muqaddas. In fact, there is one scholar, there is one alim from India, Maulana Muhammad Ali Jawhar. He is the only scholar, the only alim from the Indo-Pak continent to be buried in the precincts of Masjid Aksar. So he lived in London, but before he died, he made this wasiyah to his family. He said that when I die, I want to be buried in Darul Islam. I want to be buried in Darul Islam and not in the land of the enemy. So it is said that he enjoyed a very close relationship with the Mufti at that time of Jerusalem, and then permission was sought. And his body was from London was put onto a ship and brought to Jerusalem, and he's buried. I will show you his grave a little later. The only scholar from the Indo-Pak subcontinent was buried in Jerusalem. Okay, this is when you go into Masjid of Barak. I showed you the masjid. It is at this area now. Of course, this ring is not there from that time, but they've put a ring here now. This is the place where when Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wa Jibreel alayhi salam, tied the Barak. And if you open Bidayah wal Nihaya, he said that I dismounted from the Barak. Jibreel held me by my hand. And as I continued walking, I was introduced to the prophets of Allah. This is Adam, this is Ibrahim, and every prophet of Allah was introduced to the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then Jibreel says, "Oh Muhammad, I've traveled the earth north to east, south to west. You are Imamul Anbiya." And then he steps forward and he leads the Anbiya in Salah. So this is the interior of the masjid. It's a very small masjid now, Masjid of Barak, and which was built by Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. On the other side, in fact, this wall, this is on the other side of this wall is what we refer to as the Hayatul Barak. This is what we call it, but this is what they call the Wailing Wall, where you find that the Jews, they stand and they wail, and that is the Jewish quarters on the other sides. And the excavations, that are happening, outside Masjid Aksar, just outside this wall. In fact, when I was there now, they've sealed the entire area off. But when I went in 2019, you could see where the excavations, were taking place. Okay, this church that you see, this is known as the Holy Sepulchre. In Jewish history, right? Rather in Christianity, this is the most sacred place. This is the most sacred place in Christian history. Where Christians from all over the world they go. But we find that there are so many different, within this church, because there are so many different denominations amongst the Christians. So within this church, they have laid claim to different areas within the church. So Umar bin Khattab, he was a visionary. So when he gave the keys of the church to Al-Nusayba, he gave it to a Muslim. So when you go in the church today, you'll find that there is one denomination of the Christians, they look after a certain area, another denomination, they look after another certain area, in the church. And when you go into this church, they will show you one area where they say that is the place where, where Jesus was crucified. But of course, we don't believe that. This is the mihrab, like I said, opposite the Holy Sepulchre, where Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu had performed salah. And there is a masjid that is built now called Masjid Umar. This was built by Salahuddin al-Ayyubi radiallahu. He was a very, Salahuddin, the famous man Salahuddin, he had built a masjid which is just across, 100 feet across the Holy Sepulchre, which is known as Kanisatul Qiyamah. Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, this is where he built a masjid. This is the picture of this is the Dome of the Rock. the rock is inside. This was taken, in fact, this last Ramadan, on the 27th night of Ramadan. This is the only night that you see, there are thousands of people. There must have been perhaps in excess of 300,000-400,000 people on the 27th night of Ramadan. The reason for that is that this is the only night where they allow people from the neighboring areas, to come to Masjid Aksar. Throughout the year, it's not permissible, it's not permitted for, people that live outside Jerusalem, to come to Masjid Aksar. But on the 27th night of Ramadan, this is one night and one day wherein the authorities give them permission, and you find by hundreds of buses, people are bussed into Jerusalem, and you'll find thousands of people that converge. It's an amazing atmosphere. This place here, where the rock is, right? Now, inside here, when Nabi Salaam ascended on the journey of Mi'raj, it is said that there were some strands of hair of Nabi Salaam that were embedded on this rock. And when you put your hand, up to this day, these are not, I've seen this many a times. As you draw closer, and you can put your hand inside, and you feel that particular area, you get that scent of, like Sahaba used to say, Inni la ajidu rihal Jannah min duni Uhud. We can get the fragrance of Jannah coming from Mount Uhud. There are two places in the world where you will get the scent. One is in the Battle of Uhud. There is a cave. I'm not too sure if you've been to Medina where the battle had taken place. There's a cave at the bottom of the mountain Jabal Uhud. When you go into this cave, you get the scent of pure musk, and as you go closer, it gets stronger and stronger. And yet again, this place which is in Jerusalem, if you put your hand inside, and when you take out your hand, you can still get that scent, of pure musk. It's an amazing, something that cannot be described. And the scholars and the ulama, in fact, when we study Sufyan bin Uyayna, Sufyan Thawri is great. In fact, Faqih al-Samarqandi has recorded this. He's got a list of names of scholars and ulama that visited Baytul Muqaddas and certain specific places where they made dua to the Almighty Allah. And this is one of the places where the rock is. You go into the bottom, into the cave. This is a place which is highly spiritual. And the scholars and the ulama have explained that this is a place where du'as are readily accepted, by the Almighty Allah. Okay, inshallah, we'll just look at one or two slides, and thereafter we will just break for a few minutes. This is the graveyard that we spoke about earlier on. Okay, these are the walls of the old city. Just outside the walls of the old city, this is the Muslim Qabristan. In this graveyard, there are two graves that are known to us. Ubadah bin Samit and Shaddad bin Aus radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And according to some scholars and ulama, there are other graves of other Sahaba, but the precise location of those graves are unknown to us. But there are two graves that we know. In this particular Qabristan, this graveyard is known as Maqbaratul Rahmah, as the graveyard of mercy. And there are many pious people, many Sahaba that are buried in this graveyard, and many pious people that are buried. And in fact, even up to this day, they've got a few graveyards in Baytul Muqaddas in Jerusalem, but this graveyard is still used up to this day. Normally when the people of Jerusalem pass away, they bury them in this particular graveyard. Inshallah, we will just stop at the point and we will continue after 10 minutes, 5 minutes inshallah. Inshallah, there are some refreshments that are at the back of the hall. Inshallah, in the meantime, if you have any questions, just try and maybe just record your questions, and we will try and answer them.
Aksar right after tonight. So I'm actually going to tell you. We'll be finishing there around 5:30. We came before 6:15. We're trying to be a person. Sure. That should be okay. That should be fine. So then we can pick up with that.
I'll give you a call.
Sir.
Why did people say that this is a weak hadith about putting the ihram and praying?
No, it's not a fabricated hadith. It appears in Abu Dawood.
Yeah, it's Abu Dawud.
Yeah, there's one or two narrators in this hadith. Because of that, they've classified it to be a bit of a weak. But in terms of fadail and virtue, to practice upon it is. In fact, there are many muhaddithin themselves who practice upon this. Yeah.
Even Sahaba, you know. Ibn Umar.
Yeah, Ibn Umar. In many Sahaba.
Who else is going to be more learned than him?
Yes, they all.
Yeah.
So generally, a weak hadith is not a fabricated hadith. Yes, yeah.
You mentioned that the original mosque was why is that?
So it was, you see, when they, over the years, when they rebuilt, like even in Medina, the original masjid was at the bottom.
Okay.
So it's not where you see the masjid today in Medina, like the grave is right at the bottom. It was raised, so they built, they leveled the ground because, I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
You see where Masjid Aksar is, the Dome of the Rock is at the top. And this was right at the bottom. So they filled that area and then they built the masjid on top of it.
So they geologically
Yes,
leveled.
yeah.
The reason for that being
I'm not very sure. So like where you see the masjid to the top, that's not the original place where it was built. It was built at the bottom.
so I'm assuming just like over time like it grabs things.
Possibly, yeah.
Okay.
Possibly.
Thank you.
Salam, how are you? You're right. Yes, yeah.
Oh, okay. Was that the place?
It is alleged. We cannot say with absolute certainty.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
That's one of the things.
Yeah.
This will be easier. You agree?
All right, how are you keeping? All right?
I'm just going to head out. I've got to go to Cambridge and come back.
You're in Cambridge?
Yeah, I'd rather just with my cousin yesterday. He bought the vehicle that he wanted to check out. So he wanted me to stop with him and then I went by him to go pick up his father. I was like, I'm already halfway there. I might as well just do it.
Okay, all right.
So
So we'll meet you later.
inshallah. I'll be here by inshallah.
Okay.
Just after.
Inshallah. All right. Salam. No.
What about the tea?
We'll have it later, inshallah. Salam.
Did you want anything?
No. Jazakallah. Yeah. All right.
Water? Oh, yeah. You want more? Or?
No, Jazakallah so much.
Alaikum Assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Kalisat, we are keeping up. I'm in Canada at the moment, so I've just got one program now and one this evening, and I'm leaving it tomorrow, inshallah. I'll be back home on Wednesday. Kalisat, both the Muratar Jamil is in Medina. In fact, there's a friend of mine who is with him. Let me ask him. You know, Maulana had some issues there, elderly with the crowds and things like that, so he's been confined to the hotel room. Let me check, inshallah, with this friend. Let me know what dates they will be there in Medina.
Which other hotel than Funduk Hashmi is you find much better?
In the old city?
Yeah.
No, that's the only one. There's a hostel, which is on the other side. Hashmi is the more convenient.
More convenient.
Yeah.
Hashmi is the one. If you really want to make the salats.
Yeah, in Aksar. Otherwise, the hotels outside are very far.
Yeah.
What year did you go?
Went on 2019. Funduk Hashmi is this one.
Yes, yeah. Alhamdulillah. So the Rabia, in fact, in fact, I was just looking on the group and we had posted some pics when we returned, and I managed to access those pics. Jazakallah so much. Sorted. Much appreciated. Another half an hour? Yeah? Shall we? Yeah, Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Respected brothers and sisters, inshallah we'll just go another few minutes, and thereafter if you have any questions, maybe the sisters, you could just write your questions down and just leave the papers in the front. Inshallah we will try and answer them. The brothers, you could ask your questions. We'll just go through a few more of these slides. So like I mentioned, this is the graveyard called Maqbaratul Rahma we spoke about. This is the birthplace of Maryam alayhi salam. So like we said, it is alleged, it is possible that this could be the area where Maryam alayhi salam, where she was born. So when you go there today, there is a church in this particular area. So one thing I just need to make mention of, you see, with regards to these places, we cannot say with absolute certainty that that is the precise location, with the exception of the grave of Nabi alayhi salam in Medina Munawwara and the grave of Ibrahim alayhi salam, which is in Hebron. Apart from these two Anbiya, when it comes to the graves of other Anbiya, we cannot say with absolute certainty that these are the places, this is a precise location where they have been buried or this incident. So it is possibly in that particular area. This, we spoke about Masjid of Barak earlier. This is the entrance that leads down to Masjid of Barak. This is outside Masjid Aksar. So you'll find that there are many platforms like this, raised areas. So the scholars and the ulama used to conduct the durus and dars from these platforms. There are many hundreds of scholars. So you'll find there are many of these raised platforms, and there are many of these mihrabs and these places like this that have been built in honor of scholars and ulama that lived and taught and resided and passed away. Okay, now when you go to Ibrahim al-Khalil, this is in Hebron, approximately 25-30 kilometers away from Masjid Aksar. There's an area which is referred to as Hebron, and there you will find the grave of Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam. So like I mentioned earlier on, where this grave is, but remember the grave is right at the bottom. So this is the precise location at the bottom where Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam is buried. In this particular, this is the interior of the masjid, right? So in this masjid, there are 8 graves that are there. So this is the son of Ibrahim alayhi salam, Ishaq. This is his wife, Rifqa. And then you will find that the grave of Ibrahim alayhi salam, the grave of Sarah alayhi salam, the grave of Yaqub alayhi salam, the grave of Yusuf alayhi salam, and the wives of Yusuf alayhi salam and Yaqub alayhi salam. But like I mentioned, we can only say with absolute certainty, the grave of Ibrahim alayhi salam is in this particular masjid. It was in this masjid in the year 1996. There was that gunman, he walked into this masjid and he had shot down, I think there were 26 Palestinians that were reading Salah, and they passed away. It happened in this masjid. One thing I just thought I'll just make mention of, if you look at this mimbar here, okay, I think we've got another slide. Okay. What is written here? Mimbar Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. This mimbar was built in the time of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Something which is fascinating. There were 10,000 pieces of wood that were used together to put this mimbar together. No glue, there's no nails that were used. Like a puzzle, like Lego. They were put together, and there were two mimbars that were made by Nuruddin Zangi. One was placed in Masjid Aksar, and the second was placed in this masjid, Masjid Ibrahim al-Khalil. This is the original mimbar. The one in Masjid Aksar was burnt, and there was a replica mimbar that was made thereafter. But in this masjid, this is the original mimbar that was built. 10,000 pieces of wood were used, to build, this particular mimbar, and it's in Ibrahim, the Masjid Ibrahim al-Khalil. It's a very spiritual place, and this is a place as well. Many scholars and ulama, they go there specifically, just to make dua to the Almighty Allah, by the graveside of Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam. So this is, as you can see, this is the mimbar. It was, it's, something, I don't think the picture does justice to it. You have to see this firsthand. It's something amazing. It's still in the masjid and it's still used up to this day. Where on Friday, the imam in this masjid stands on this mimbar and he delivers the khutbah. So here, I mentioned earlier on about, the scholar from India, who passed away, and he was buried in Jerusalem in the precincts of Masjid Aksar, Muhammad Ali Jawhar. This is his grave. This is the interior of his grave. The only scholar from the Indo-Pak subcontinent was buried there. Okay, now what you find here, this is the maqam, and I use the word maqam, we cannot say the grave. Apart from the grave of Nabi alayhi salam and the grave of Ibrahim alayhi salam, all these other maqams, it is possible that this is the place where Nabi Musa alayhi salam, had resided. When Nabi alayhi salam went on the journey of Mi'raj, he says, I was shown the grave of Musa alayhi salam. And what did he say? If I was there, I would have shown you the grave of Musa alayhi salam at the bottom of the red sand hills. So it is alleged that this is the grave of Musa alayhi salam. I honestly don't believe this. Normally when people go on ziyarah, they normally take them to this place. So this is what we refer to as Maqam and Musa, the place where Musa alayhi salam, possibly where he could have lived. I don't believe that this is the precise location where he passed away, but something about this place here, and I made mention of it, there are many people that have been to this place. One speciality about this place, a woman who cannot conceive. There was a woman from South Africa many years ago. She tried everything, this and that. Doctors had given up hope. And somebody had mentioned to her that go here and make dua at this particular place. And she went and she made dua. And Allah blessed her with multiple children, thereafter. So with regards to whether it's the grave of Musa alayhi salam or not, we cannot say with absolute certainty. But when Nabi alayhi salam had given the description of the location of the grave of Musa alayhi salam, this particular location does not meet the description of the hadith. So what we can say that this is perhaps Maqam and Musa. Musa alayhi salam perhaps might have lived, in this particular area for a while. And there is in the nearby vicinity, some scholars and ulama say there is another grave there. They say that is the grave of Nabi Musa alayhi salam. So it's this area is very spiritual. In fact, I was there a few weeks ago and had the good fortune of visiting this particular place again. And so this is a beautiful aerial view. So where this picture is taken from the Mount of Olives. Mount of Olives, that's Masjid Aksar that you see there. This is the entire Masjid Aksar. This is the Dome of the Rock. This is the graveyard of the Muslims. This is the valley, Wadi Jahannam. This is the graveyard of the Jews. The Jews, in fact, when I was there, now one brother mentioned to me that Jews from all over the world, to be buried here, it'll cost you minimum $1 million to get a gravesite. You know, gravesite. So one brother said they're already in the hellfire, so yeah, so this is known as Wadi Jahannam. Wadi Jahannam. This place here, you see here at the bottom here, this is a very historical place. This area is known as Silwan. And these subhanallah, you know, at the bottom here, there is a spring that flows. And according to those scholars and ulama that believe that Khidr alayhi salam is still alive, according to them, they believe that Khidr alayhi salam every Friday, he takes ghusl in that particular stream. So, in fact, the space is very historical, but many of the Sahaba lived in this particular area. You know, whilst there were those that migrated, to Jerusalem, this is where they used to live. And currently, in fact, this area is under attack, and the Zionists are trying to take over, this particular area. It's known as Silwan, and in fact, this mountain that's on this side here, this is known as Jabal Mukabbir. When Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he conquered Jerusalem, the Patriarch, that is where he went to meet Umar bin Khattab. And Umar bin Khattab, when he got sight of Masjid Aksar, this is where he praised the Almighty Allah. This is where he glorified, he praised Allah, and so it's known as Jabal Mukabbir. So this is the graveyard of the Jews. That's the graveyard of the Muslims. Okay, this is the same Qabristan that we spoke about. This is the grave on Jabal Zaytun on the Mount of Olives that we spoke about, where this picture was taken from. This is the grave of Rabia al-Basriya, Rabia al-Adawiyya. She was from Basra. It is said that, she grew up in a very poor family. Why was she known as Rabia? Rabia in Arabic refers to the fourth. She was the fourth daughter. And when she left from Basra, and she came into the land of Sham. And she was a very pious woman. Much is mentioned about her. In fact, the Sufis up to this day, when you open, the books of Tasawwuf, Lahjatul Asrar and famous books of Tasawwuf, there are many quotations of Rabia al-Basriya. She was the sage of the age. And, she passed away. It is mentioned about her. She was 40 years of age when she passed away. And she received multiple proposals in her life. According to one narration, she didn't marry. But then her husband had passed away, and she couldn't give birth to children. And then she decided that she wants to devote her life, to Allah. And she came and she secluded a place, in this particular area. She had a servant that used to take care of her, and she engaged in the dhikr of Allah for the rest of her life. It is said when she reached the point of death, whoever was there around her, she ordered them to excuse themselves. And it is said that the angels came and surrounded this particular area. And when she died, somebody had seen her in a vision and a dream. And they asked her, Rabia, how did you fare before the Almighty Allah? So she says, the angels came to question me. So the first question that was posed to me was, Mar Rabbuk, who is your Lord? So she says, I told the angels, for 40 years of my life, I didn't forget about Allah. You think I'm going to go 6 feet down and I'm going to forget about Allah? She says, the angels ask me no questions, no more questions. So this area is there. You go into the bottom of the cave, you walk down a flight of stairs, right next to the point where Isa Salaam ascended to the heavens, and you'll find this particular place where it is mentioned that this is the grave of Rabia al-Basriya, Rabia al-Adawiyya. Okay, now when you travel to, this is a very sad, this is what we refer to as the West Bank. When you're driving from Jerusalem, you're driving to Hebron, where Ibrahim alayhi salam's grave is. This is the land that was stolen from the Muslims. It is what is known as the West Bank, and this is the wall, that is built to separate, the Palestinians from the West Bank. It is said that they have spent in the region of $2 billion, so what they have done now, because the Palestinians, they try and scale this wall, and many of them, tried to jump over and they fell, and many of them passed away. So this is the wall that they are still building. It stretches for miles and miles and kilometers, just to separate the Palestinians, from this land. So all this land that once upon a time belonged to the Palestinians, is now in the ownership, or rather it's the land that has been stolen by the Zionists, by the Jews, and they've taken occupation. And you speak to some of these Palestinians and they share with you, some of the stories, how they were displaced from their homes. In fact, there was one brother, I met him a few years ago, and he mentioned to me, he said it was late at night. Himself, his parents, his kids, they were sleeping, and there were hundreds of these Jewish soldiers. They barged into the home, and it was late at night, took the kids out of the home, his parents, and in front of their eyes, they broke down his entire home. And, he had to start his life again. And, like that, in the precincts of Masjid Aksar, I was mentioning it to somebody yesterday, that there is a Palestinian brother who owns a shop, which is very close to Masjid Aksar. And he was offered a few years ago, $24 million. Perhaps it's like a 2x2. $24 million, not only that, citizenship in America and your children's university fees would be paid, but just to protect, Masjid Aksar. They would never sell it for all the money in the world. And in fact, there's a hadith, which is mentioned also. This is what we refer to as the Dead Sea. This is where, Ibrahim alayhi salam, his cousin was Lut alayhi salam. So Ibrahim alayhi salam was born in Turkey, in Urfa, and he and his cousin Lut alayhi salam, Ibrahim alayhi salam migrated to Palestine. This is where he lived. And his cousin Lut alayhi salam then migrated to approximately 40 kilometers away. 40 or 50 kilometers is where you would find the Dead Sea. Sodom and Gomorrah, the famous 7 cities of Lut alayhi salam. Approximately, the hadith of Bukhari says, more than 400,000 people were living in the 7 cities of Lut alayhi salam. And Allah sent Jibreel, to destroy the 7 cities of Lut alayhi salam. And, they all were destroyed. Even the wife of Lut alayhi salam. So Lut alayhi salam, he had left, his nation, and he had watched his entire nation, being destroyed. So this is the Dead Sea. It's not, it's landlocked. So they call it the Dead Sea, but there's no vegetation, nothing can live. What you can see, this is chunks of salt. You see when you go down to the Dead Sea, it's a place of punishment. So some scholars and ulama have advised not to go, but for purposes of ibrah, to take lessons, people normally just go past, and with regards to the Dead Sea products, this is something which is not permissible for a person to use. And there's just one more we will share with you. This is the maqam of Nabi Dawood alayhi salam. This is where Dawood alayhi salam used to worship the Almighty Allah. This is in the precincts of Masjid Aksar, which is now under the ownership of the the Yahuds. They look after this particular area. This is the chamber of Dawood alayhi salam. When we study his life, he used to divide his days into 3. One day was exclusively reserved for the worship of the Almighty Allah. And this is the place where he used to worship the Almighty Allah. In fact, there are 2 incidents recorded in Quran. We don't have time, making reference to this particular area. So this is known as Maqam Dawood. The place where Dawood alayhi salam used to worship. They built. So I don't believe that this is where his grave is. Allah alone knows the precise location where the grave of Dawood alayhi salam is. But it's somewhere in this area. But this is known as Maqam Dawood. Where he used to engage in the worship. It was the chamber where he used to worship the Almighty Allah. So this is a very brief, very brief tour of Masjid Aksar and the surroundings. We hope from the Almighty Allah, Allah Ta'ala grant us, the tawfiq, that those who have not been, make this intention, inshallah, that we will travel to Baytul Muqaddas. Those of us who have been, Allah Ta'ala take us again and again. Inshallah, we will just, if you have any questions, inshallah, sisters, just leave your papers in the front and we will try and answer your questions. Brothers, if you've got any questions, we will try and answer them. No questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
When's the tour going?
When is the tour going? When you put it together, inshallah. When you get all your murids. So normally people are a bit apprehensive. When you go there, normally at the border, they make you wait, for a few hours. As a matter of what I found is that anybody under the age of 40, they make you wait. Anybody above the age of 40, they allow you to go. 40, 50, they allow you to go. But under the age of 40, they keep you for a while. They want to test your patience. No real interrogation, but they question you, why you're going and whatever it is. So a few people, they did turn them away. In fact, this year as well. I don't know for what reason. But normally they allow people to, to enter, but they test your patience. Some people, they make them wait for 8 hours, 10 hours. But average is like 4 hours. They make you wait.
Are the worshippers allowed to worship in peace?
Yes, with regards to when you go into the masjid, nobody interferes with you. You can worship Allah, you can perform salah. Out of Ramadan, they normally open the masjid. Masjid Aksar is opened at the time of Fajr, and immediately after Isha, the masjid is closed. In Ramadan, it stays open, 24 hours. When there is some issue, when it's a bit hostile and it gets a bit volatile, then they close the doors, of the masjid. So, many of these videos that we're doing the rounds this Ramadan, many of those videos were old videos. And in fact, whilst I was there, people telling me, "Well, are you there in Masjid Aksar and it's under attack?" I said, "I'm talking to you from the masjid. It's absolutely safe. It's absolutely, when things are calm, there's no issues at all." See? So the sisters, no questions? Inshallah, it's 5 minutes and thereafter we will wrap up, inshallah. Brothers, no questions? But like I said, to experience this, you have to, go there firsthand, to get the feel of what this place is all about. It's a place which is rich with barakah and blessings, undoubtedly. It's a place which is rich with barakah and blessings, and, try and make this intention at least, once in our lives, and to visit Baytul Muqaddas. So that's the whole idea of these programs, just as an appetizer to create a thirst, within us, to go and visit these blessed lands.
When is the best time to visit these places?
The best time is in winter. It gets really cold, but I think cold, it's synonymous to Canada, and but where I come from, we're too used to the cold. So the best time would be around March, April, maybe May, and August, September, October is the best part of the year to visit. The winters are quite cold and the days are short. So I would advise people rather go and the summers are quite hot as well. So either March, April, May, or August, September, October is the ideal time to go there.
And how many days should you set aside for such trip?
Depending how much you want to see, there's so much of history. If you want to see just the main places, I would suggest that you spend about 3 days in Palestine and 3 days in Jordan. What we spoke about is just around the precincts of Masjid Aksar. So, how many places, in fact, we just spoke about a few. Just around the masjid itself, there are 250 places of interest, just in the old city. So there's a lot of history there. Normally when we go on the tour of the old city, it takes minimum about 4 or 5 hours. At least about 5 hours, just to see the old city.
So is the old city outside the walls or within the walls?
Within the walls, yeah, within the walls. So the first picture that we had seen, that is all part of the old city. Yes. Okay, the question is, why are they excavating? Is that they want to once again, according to them, they want to establish the temple of Solomon, the temple of Sulaiman alayhi salam. And the excavation has been going on for many, many years. And people always ask me what's my honest opinion, what would happen. Remember, Masjid Aksar, according to some scholars and ulama, was taken away from the Muslims many, many times. Some scholars say 10 times, some of them say 30 times, some of them say 40 times. Was taken away from the Muslims. The Muslims once again, recaptured Masjid Aksar. So, according to, I met not an alim, but rather a very influential brother, very spiritually, very spiritual. I met him in Palestine some years ago. And according to him, he said that what they are trying to do, they're trying to destroy the masjid. And they want to once again establish, the temple of Solomon. And this is going to continue right up to the end of time. This al-jihadu madin ila yawm al-qiyamah. It's going to continue right up to the end of time. And I think the only solution you would find is that when Isa Salaam makes his presence, Imam Mahdi Isa Salaam, and after killing the Dajjal, this will be towards the end of time. So the scholars and the ulama have explained that Masjid Aksar, this is a barometer of the condition of Muslims globally, just to determine what is the condition of Muslims globally. So there will be this uprising, and So that's the ultimate intention, is to destroy the masjid. And there was they had suggested to the Muslims a few years ago, but this would never happen. Like we had shown you that Masjid Ibrahim alayhi salam is buried. What they had done there, they had divided the masjid. So the Jews took part of the masjid and they gave half to the Muslims. So they want to do the same to Masjid Aksar. That you give us half and you keep half. But the resistance is too much, and Allah will protect this particular piece of land.
The Shafi Sahib mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised the protection of Haramain.
Yes.
Okay, he said, but others also depends on the affairs of the state of the Muslims.
Absolutely. Inna Allah la yughayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim. Allah will not change the condition of the ummah until they change themselves. So it's a barometer, to determine what's happening there. And if the actions of Muslims are good, then favorable conditions will come upon Baytul Muqaddas.
But this has been experienced that you get the entry if you go with family. There are less questions to ask than.
If you're going with family, yes.
Yeah. They give you permission.
Is there anything in Quran or Hadith about Palestine's liberation in specific? With regards to the liberation of Masjid Aksar, of course it is mentioned that towards the end of time, it would be liberated. It would be liberated. Is it true that there are books on black magic that are from the Jews years ago under Masjid Aksar? In fact, ironically, you're asking this question. You see, the wife of Ishaq, her name was Rifqa, and where she is buried, there is a place which is about 10 kilometers away. I went there now, and I was quite astounded, by this. And you find that these Jews, they spend days on end, and they start dabbling in witchcraft. It happens up to this day. You find them, they take pieces of string and they tie it around the qabr of Rifqa, and they start doing all this black magic. It's about Kabbalah and all this here. It happens there up to the. I saw it firsthand, when I went, and I was quite astounded, that up to this day they are still, practicing this type of black magic. With regards to are there any books on black magic under Masjid Al-Aqsa? This Allah alone knows. But when you go into this particular area where the wife of Ishaq alayhi salam is buried, according to Jewish tradition, one is where the Wailing Wall is. That's number one. That's the most historical place for them. And the second place is where the wife of Ishaq alayhi salam is buried, Rifqa. So they all go there, Jews from all over the world. They go and visit this particular place. And this is where a lot of this black magic, takes place. How does the Pul Sirat look right now? We cannot see it. This is, Nabi alayhi salam said, it will be, thinner than a strand of a hair and sharper than a blade of a sword. This is not visible to the naked eye. This Allah alone knows, close to the end of time. Okay, are there any other historical sites to be found underground? Yes, there are many, many historical places. If you go at the basement, Masjid Aksar, there are many, many historical places that are found there. And whereabout is the temple of Sulaiman. According to them, they said that you see the basement of, beneath the masjid, that is where they believe is the temple of Solomon. So that is why they want to take ownership. Remember, Masjid Aksar is central to all three Abrahamic faiths, to the Christians, to the Jews, and to the Muslims. So they will continue fighting for this. And there are many of the churches that were under the control, that were given to the Christians by Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu. In the recent past, these churches have been taken over, by the Jews. In fact, one place is Lud. I saw this when I went now, where Dajjal would be killed. There is a masjid that was built by Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. That masjid was built approximately 270 years ago. It's still standing up to this day. And next to the masjid was a church. In the church, there is one maqam of King George. Who was King George? That is, they say Khidr alayhi salam. His maqam is there. So just before COVID, the Jews went and they took over this particular church. And I'd seen, hundreds of Christians, they come with a bus, but the church is now closed. They stand outside and they do their prayers. And they tried taking over the masjid. But the resistance of the Palestinians, alhamdulillah, they managed to protect this masjid. And this masjid, is Abad. 24/7 you'll find that there are Muslims, that are in this masjid. So this happened just prior to COVID.
I was talking about the Dajjal, but what about Ya'juj and Ma'juj?
Yes, Ya'juj and Ma'juj, they will, after the Dajjal is killed, then Ya'juj and Ma'juj, they will make their presence on this earth. And Isa Salaam, Allah Ta'ala will inspire him, and then he will make dua to the Almighty Allah. So they will, this is another topic altogether. Some people say there's some third being. They're not some third being, they are the children of Adam alayhi salam. When Nabi alayhi salam said on the day of Qiyamah, where out of every 1,000, 999 will go to Jahannam, and one person will go to Jannah. So Sahaba said, O Nabi of Allah, if 999 out of every 1,000 will go to Jahannam, who will be that one lucky person? Nabi alayhi salam said 999 will be Ya'juj and Ma'juj, and the one person will be person from my ummah. So Ya'juj, it's a very vast topic. So they will make their presence, towards the end of time. That wall that was built by Zulqarnain, that iron wall, they will try to penetrate that wall. And one day when they come and they will say, Inshallah, they will penetrate through this wall and they will create chaos and havoc on the earth, and they will kill every living creature on Mother Earth. And thereafter they will direct their arrows to the skies, and they will say that we have killed the inhabitants of the earth, we now want to kill the dwellers of the skies. Allah will return those arrows stained with blood, falsely giving them that hope. Allah Ta'ala will then inspire Nabi Isa Salaam. Isa Salaam will then make dua to the Almighty Allah, and Allah Ta'ala, they all will die at one go. They all will die at one go. And because of the stench of the bodies of Ya'juj and Ma'juj, Isa Salaam will make dua to the Almighty Allah. Allah will send down rains from the heavens, which will wash the bodies of Ya'juj and Ma'juj, and it will clean the earth. And Isa Salaam, thereafter, after Ya'juj and Ma'juj are killed, he will go to Medina Munawwara, he will take up residence in Medina, he will pass away in Medina, and he will be buried next to Sahibain, next to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and Abu Bakr and Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma. This is where he will be buried. This comes in the narration of Abu Dawood. So this is our belief. So the topic of Ya'juj and Ma'juj is another vast topic. We need about an hour or two just to discuss that. So, this would happen after Dajjal is killed. I mentioned Babul Lud. I went to Lud. This is a town which is predominantly inhabited by the Jewish people today. That is the place. In fact, there is an area there where Dajjal would be killed, by Nabi Isa Salaam. Bas, inshallah. Jazakallah for attending this program. We hope that we have added some value to your time, on a Sunday afternoon. So my message is, inshallah, make this intention, whilst we have life and whilst we have our youth, to go and visit Baytul Muqaddas. And really, this is something that cannot be described in words. It adds a different perspective to life. When you visit there and you experience firsthand, it's unlike Makkah and Medina where you see modern buildings. Here you go back in time and you are reliving. You go back and you see these old buildings. In fact, there are some masjids. You go to Tel Aviv. Before I left now, there is a masjid there that was built in the year 1711. In the year 2020, you do the maths. 1711, this masjid was built by the Ottomans. It's still there up to this day. Beautiful masjid, mashallah. And there are some masjids that were built from the time of the Sahaba. When the Sahaba migrated to the land of Sham, so you go into the land of Sham, you will still find some masjids, that were built, from that time. Bas, subhanallah,
Jazakumullah khair, Maulana. Inshallah, Maulana will be here this evening also. So our spiritual retreat, the normal programs will continue today after Asr, inshallah, until Isha. Our brothers and sisters are welcome and requested to participate. Again, Jazakumullah khair, Maulana, for benefiting us. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and we hope, inshallah, you can join us again for another workshop. Inshallah. And inshallah, we'll see you in the tour.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khairan. Barakallah.
Subhanallah, bihamdi, subhanallah.